Welcome back, folks. How are we all doing today? You ever felt lonely? Like your life is meaningless and going nowhere? You sort of have this ceaseless agony? Like there's nothing? That you're feeling a little empty? Well then, it's good timing, because today we're taking a look at the horror thriller The Empty Man, which was released last year in 2020 and directed by David Pryor, who's not really well known for a lot of big pictures, but is actually more well known for his body of work for video documentaries, especially for special features for famous director David Fincher. He was given the opportunity through 20th Century Fox to basically make whatever movie that he wanted. But of course, unfortunately, there was a lot of studio interference, especially after the acquisition by Disney, which means that they cut his film down to 90 minutes, which really didn't help with the reception of this film, as well as it getting widespread attention. And so that's why I'm talking about the film here today, because it's really not that well known despite having it come out during the pandemic last year. And despite some of its flaws, it is actually a very fascinating horror picture. So in describing the story, well, I'm going to do my best without revealing too much while also trying to piece some of it together, so bear with me. So the film actually starts off with a very lengthy prologue. Some people might tell you that's up to half an hour, when really it's just about 21 minutes, which I think is not really that bad considering. The prologue is actually pretty interesting. It feels like an urban legend before we get to the meat of the film. So we follow 4 American students who go to Bhutan for travel, where one of the characters, Paul, falls through a crevice in the rock where he discovers this very strange, large skeleton, something almost alien in origin. There's this strange high-pitched tune that puts him in a trance and basically causes 3 days of, well, it's a horror film, so not a lot of good things happen to these characters. Which the characters have 3 days, as conveyed through the Shining-style titles, Day 1, 2, 3. And the film is actually based on a comic book series of the same name, but whereas the plot is about a pandemic, these stories aren't really that relatable, so there's no point in comparing them. And these events took place in 1995, and now we're caught up to the present, 2018, in Missouri, where we follow our main character, ex-cop James Lasombra, played by James Dale, who's neighbors and friends with a woman named Nora Quayle, played by Marin Ireland, whose daughter Amanda, played by Sasha Furlova. She talks to James about some cryptic philosophical stuff before the day that she runs away from home. The only clue she leaves behind is blood writing on her mirror saying, "The empty man made me do it." So James takes it upon himself to investigate her disappearance, which leads him to the story of the empty man, which the tale goes that if you're on a bridge and you blow through a bottle while thinking about him, and the empty man will show up to you in about 3 days, probably meet with your demise. There's this other really cool detail that's not explained clearly, but it's just really interesting. So when the empty man confronts you, he'll just stand there waiting for you to act. If you step backward, he will step forward. If you step forward, he will step backward. But of course, if you step backward too many times, then he'll actually start pursuing you, chasing in fact. It's almost like he's waiting for you to invite him in, which makes it even creepier. So James's investigation leads him to a cult called the Pontifex Institute, who worships the empty man, which of course leads to a lot of, horror and strange discoveries, which the ending of the film is kind of mind-blowing and reveals a lot. I just kind of wanted to point that out to you guys because there's a lot of trying to figure out the idea behind the story. There's a lot of philosophy being thrown around in this film, specifically inspired by philosophers like Jacques Derrida and Friedrich Nietzsche. So as you can guess, there's a major theme about nihilism in this film. So the one thing I can say is that this is a very well-made film. The visuals are clearly inspired by David Fincher. His style sort of oozes throughout the film. There's a lot of really nice frame shots where the characters are aligned in the middle and between, usually 2 other objects. So there's a really nice sense of color and contrast. There's also the use of a lot of quick shots in this film, which are usually used to show repeated patterns that are happening throughout the story. For example, in the prologue, we see one of the characters putting down a knife. It's just a quick cut, so it's really easy to miss. But then we have another quick cut showing the same place and that the knife has disappeared. We don't know where it went. And that kind of stuff is sprinkled throughout the film. There's a lot of use of repeated patterns to kind of give this sense of hypnotism. In fact, the best way to describe this film is hypnotic cosmic horror. So if you're into that kind of thing, definitely give this a watch. Another example too is the strange skeleton holds his hands just like this. And it's clear later in the film that James also finds himself doing the same gesture because he's influenced by certain factors. When it comes to the creepy scenes, there's a couple specifically in mind. There's one scene that involves a dancing cult around a bonfire, and there's another scene involving a teddy bear. There's also another disturbing scene where James watches a VHS tape where the person in front of the camera uses his insides to write a cryptic picture. I'm usually not a fan of cults and horror films because I feel like they're overdone, but I feel like there's a direct purpose in them being in this story. Mostly because there's a big philosophical theme behind the happenings of the story. So with that said, The Empty Man gets my score of 3 stars. Guys, thanks so much for watching. Have you all seen The Empty Man? If not, what else have you been watching lately? Comment below, let me know, and of course stay tuned right here if you all want to see more.